Hello everybody, Alexander Thompson here with the Minimalist Entrepreneur. Now no code is awesome, I'm a big fan of it, but what we see is that they do have some level of login that allows you not so easily to move to another platform or to go into custom coding without having to start from scratch. And that is the objective with this video. We're going to be looking at 4 different no-code web application builders: Webflow, Bildr, Drapcode and Wappler, and they all allow for different level of exporting. For each solution, we're going to be briefly looking at their website, their pricing, and a look inside their visual builder. So let's get started. So the first one on the list is Webflow. Now for Webflow, we're going to go over this one rather quickly, simply because it is so famous, so for most people you already know it. Now Webflow is really a great way to build websites. You can do some different things with it, including creating e-commerce, and it has some good CMS database for creating blogs. Now it's not really meant for web applications, but you can do it if you want to. So you could use, for example, Firebase integration with Webflow, but again, it's really not targeting web applications, but more the websites, blogs, and this new e-commerce component they now have. Again, for me, Webflow is probably one of the best visual builders out there when it comes to creating the front end. It has really a beautiful interface, and it is overall just really amazing in that sense. Now in our case, we want to have a look at the ability to export code. This cannot be achieved with the basic starter package. Instead, you need to go with the light one, which is $16 if you're an individual. And in here you can see then you have this ability to export your code. Now looking inside the Bildr, again, I'm a really big fan of this. On the left hand side you have the panel here with the different components that you want to add. You then have, if you want to add some symbols, this is the navigator of on the page itself. You then have database, and then you also have plugins, and in this case you have the e-commerce. Now when you click on a certain component here, you then on the right hand side have the design, styling and such abilities. Now they're all quite nice and clean, and again very nicely made. Now what I want to quickly show you is that the code exportability. Now that comes up here on the top right hand where you can export the code. Okay, so looking at the export code, this is how it looks like. You have the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript and the assets at the end that you have. Now I only have the basic package, which means I cannot actually export the code. I can look at it, but I don't have the ability to export it as such. So you could in theory actually just write it out if you want to, but that is not the goal here, right? That is the ability to export. So to do that, you would have to upgrade your plan, and then you can export your whole site. Okay, so the next one we're looking at is Bildr. Now Bildr is a rather new one. I think it also only was released this year to the public. And Bildr is more for web application, while again Webflow was more for website and e-commerce. So with Bildr, it gives you a snapshot here of how it looks like. It's a big canvas, a bit like a Dalo. So here you have the different screens, the different components where you can then connect them with each other. And I think what is quite a fun thing about Bildr is that, so the Bildr Studio was somehow built by itself. So they have a YouTube video out there if you want to have a look, where they actually show and explain how they built the different components. So moving down to what you can build with it, again, is very much focused on web applications, not mobile. So you can do different things such as a SaaS product, internal application. And I think one thing that stands out for Bildr is that you can also do Chrome extensions with Bildr, which I have not seen anywhere with no code. So you can build some sort of scraping services or a way to display information, again, whatever it is that you would like to achieve. So if you look at the pricing of Bildr, you have 3 different options: the free model, the launch and the pro. And with the free one, you can even do 2 projects. You have unlimited pages and routes, and you can do the preview of your function and app. Now, of course, if you actually want to publish this to production, you have to go for at least the launch pricing, where you can then publish to production. You have also the custom domains, which is also quite nice. Now, if you want to do anything beyond that, Pro of $29 a month is the most expensive one. So you have the exporting the ability of HTML, CSS, and export Chrome extension if that's what you want to build. Okay, so now we are inside the Bildr Studio. So this is how it looks like. It's one big canvas, which can be quite nice. So you have the overview of all the different pages and the components that you have created in whatever way you want. On the left-hand side, you have the different pages. You can have your data collection and users that you want. If you see, what I want to mention is that when I click on it, it's a bit slow, I would say, to respond. So that's one thing I've noticed, especially with Bildr. It's mostly when you start it up for the first time. When you click around the page, it's a bit slow, but after a while, it kind of, it gets fine. Anyways, moving on, we have the media, we have the fonts here. If you want to do that, you have the style classes. So here you can specifically mention what are the CSS that you would like. URL page routes, page headers, security, authentication, so different things here. And here you can create the pages that you want. So it's a bit slow to load. Right, so you have different options like landing pages, home pages, if you want that. You can also have blocks. Yeah, as you see, again, the response. So here you have different blocks that you can use, like headers, product screenshots, so this is more website stuff. Now with patterns, these are things that they have been created that you can then add to yourself. I think mostly what we're seeing are the patterns at this point created by Bildr themselves. So you have something called a Tango NFT clone, which was created by, I think, one of Bildr's co-founders. You have different things, Google Charts here as well. If you want user authentication, to import that, data manipulation. So you have really different, or you even have MetaMask. So some interesting use cases. I mean, like MetaMask and NFT, bit unusual compared to what I've seen in other no-code options. So that's quite nice. Again, if you wanted to add an element, here you go. So you click on element, and then you have, page sections, you have the different layouts, buttons, input fields, media, you got display, so they have a lot of different things, to be honest. Okay, next, so when you click on a page, it then opens up two sides. So on the left-hand side, you have the page body with a hierarchy on what is on that page. And then on the right-hand side, you have more the details such as properties, styling, and the events. So right now I'm clicking on a div, so you don't see so much. But if I would click on this H1, then you also have more information. You have the styling that you can specify here. And also I can do the events. So if someone clicks on the H1, I would then select what of the flows that I want to use. So here you see the different type of flows. Now, if you want to create a new flow beyond what you see here, like, open page binding page load, you then have to go over here to flows, and then you can then, create a new flow and then link that click to the new flow that you've created. So that's pretty much how it works within the pages and the flows and the styling. And as mentioned, as you saw in the pricing with Bildr, you can export your HTML and CSS for your pages. I unfortunately don't have the right tier to do this, so I cannot show you, but there are some YouTube videos online that give you this indication, and where you can then have the ability to export each of your pages and your components, HTML and CSS. Okay, now to the third one, Drapcode. So Drapcode, also a relatively new one, I think started in 2020. And again, like Bildr, you can then build custom web application without writing code. Now going down to the features that they provide. So you have the typical drag and drop, responsive design. You can do custom database, so you can choose Google Sheet, Airtable, MongoDB, which I really like when there's this option very easily. One thing I don't like about Bubble, to be honest, is that you can use Bubble's database quite easily, but if you want to use someone else's database, it becomes a little bit trickier. And one thing about Drapcode is that while Bildr could only export HTML, CSS, with Drapcode, you can actually export the whole source code of your no-code app, including the databases and everything. That's really cool. So it's one of the few web application builders where you can actually do this. And lastly, you can also deploy anywhere you want to give you that more level of flexibility. Now, Drapcode has multiple different packages. You have a free one where you can definitely try it out with a few, let's say, limitations, such as only one webhook, one data source, not much storage, and 5 plugins. But it's still a great way for you to try it out. Now, next is a starter package of $25 a month. This is where you see a little bit more things, like you have 5 webhooks and 5 data sources and more pages and collections and so on. Also, it's important, usually you want to have your own custom domain when it is your own web application. And then when you go into the more expensive packages, professional and growth, this is only at this point where we get the option of code export. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind for Drapcode is that you cannot just export code just by having the professional plan. So you actually have to go down at the bottom of the page, where you can then see that for the professional plan, you can export your code for $300 per export, and for the growth plan, you can do it for $1,000 per export per app. Now, this is also supposed to be a reduction from these prices. So that's something you have to keep in mind. I mean, $300 for the export, I think it's not too bad. Most likely, you will only export it, I guess, when you want to move on to a different platform, or if you want to start doing custom code. So for that price, it's still a lot cheaper than if you had to rebuild everything from scratch. So in here, this is the Drapcode dashboard, where you see the different apps I have at the moment. If I go to this one, I have then the project Bildr. Okay, and here you have a look at how Drapcode Visual Builder looks like. On the left-hand side, you have the components that you want to add. So you have a list of different components. You have the pages that you have created. So, we could look at different things like job list, for example, or if it's specific for the employer, for them to sign up, it would look like this. So you can see different things. Then you have the collection. So this is the database structure that you have. Now you also have a section of the plugins. So in here you can do the different plugins that are available, the ones that you can download. So you have Google Analytics, Trustpilot widget. So you see a list of different plugins. So again, you see there are not too many here, I would say, compared to platforms like Bubble, which has like insane amount of options. Now going down to settings, what I want to show you quickly is the data source. So in here, you can use different REST APIs. You don't have to use the collections that is in Drapcode. So if you have Google Sheet, Airtable, Firestore, Firebase Functions, so all of that stuff, which I really like, that it's very easy to integrate. So they even show you here, sort of a little setup where you can then put in the required information that you need in order to set up Google Sheet, which is quite, I think, a neat way of doing it. Now looking back here on the page, so when you click on anywhere on this one itself, on a component, you have on the right-hand side, again, where you can do the styling, the classes and such. It reminds me a little bit of Webflow by having this sort of ability of adding classes, which is, I think, quite nice. Again, you have the alignment, you have the different things as well you can do beyond this. Another way as well, if you want us to look at the components, you can just click up here. So in here you have the different component list, you have the sections, including the different pre-built layouts that they have created for you, which is nice. There are multiple different options that you can choose from. And lastly, what I want to show you is that, of course, you can, let's close this, you can, of course, view the code. So in here, you can view the code. Even though I'm not on a more expensive plan, so I'm using the free plan at the moment, you can still see the HTML and CSS code. So you can actually just copy this if you wanted to. So that's also quite nice, and you can see exactly what is happening on individual pages. Again, if you want to export the whole code base with all of the logic in the background and so on, you would then have to go for the professional package and then pay that $300 at the moment to make that one-time export. So lastly, we are now on Wappler. Now Wappler is probably more of a low-code solution, and that's also how they market themselves. So with Wappler, also if you see it, generally the website, it is feeling more techy in general compared to the other solution that we looked at and the website. So the target market is definitely not for beginners. It is more targeting experienced individuals as well as developers. So with Wappler, it's not the best tool if you want to build an MVP and you have to learn Wappler from scratch. Wappler is probably more when you want to go from the initial validation and your first MVP, and now you want to go into the stage of gaining traction and creating some more custom features. Then it's probably the time when you want to say, okay, time to learn Wappler. But with Wappler, I mean, you get a lot more options compared to existing no-code tools. It's a lot more flexible. It gives you a lot more control than traditional no-code, but it also means there's a lot more of a learning curve. For example, if you have to set up authentication, it's a lot more complex than using the existing no-code tools. So with Wappler, you go into discussions such as you have to do the hosting yourself. You start thinking about, okay, do I need Docker support, running things locally? So there's a lot of more things to consider. And that's also why for a lot of people, it's a bit scary, I would say, Wappler. But again, if you decide to learn it, you can really do pretty much anything with Wappler. And I would say the big benefit as well is that, imagine you create a product and you gain a lot of interest. And actually, if someone wants to acquire your company, there are often this issue of, hey, do they really want to acquire a company that is based on just no code? Or do they prefer something like Wappler, where they can essentially take the code and do whatever they want with it. So even though it's a visual builder, everything generates code that you control and host and manage yourself. Now with Wappler, they now support Node.js. They also do PHP mostly, but also now with the Node.js. And another thing I want to mention is that they recently launched Wappler 4.0. So if you go through Wappler, most of the content, documentation, tutorials is for an older Wappler version. Now with the new Wappler 4.0, there are some important differences compared to the older versions, which can probably make it harder for you to actually learn Wappler due to this issue. But again, they're working hard, as I understand right now, to create new content for Wappler 4.0, document, and again, make it easy for beginners to start using it. Now, if we look at the pricing of Wappler, so they have some different packages for individuals, companies, and students, as well as monthly and yearly. Now with Wappler Basic, you don't get so much. This is more for just creating a static website. If you want to go more into creating web applications or mobile applications, then you have to definitely go for Wappler Pro, where you then can again build the dynamic websites, the mobile apps, and you have all of the powerful admin and endpoints and so on that you need. An interesting thing about Wappler, they do not have a free version, although they do give you a free 7-day trial to at least try it out and see if you like it. Now a big difference compared to the others is that they don't actually have this cloud no-code solution. Instead, you actually have to download an application, the Wappler application, which I did for Mac. After you download the Wappler application, you then get access to Wappler, where again you have the different information that you can see. So in my case, I just chose an example real estate that they had already created, just to give you a feeling of how it looks like. But again, as you see, this is already a lot more than the typical no-code stuff. So at the bottom here, you see a bit more details on the div, container, and so on, the body. And if we see here, you have the design, right? So this is where you have more the design look. If you click the code button, then you see directly already the code. Again, there's no question regarding export code for Wappler because you own all the files yourself. So whenever you create a new file, you actually have to store the file on your computer, and the files will be stored in a certain syntax language that you're using, whether it's HTML, CSS, or whether it's server-side like Node.js. So there's no question of exporting. You are in full control of all of the data. When it comes to the general look of it, you have on the left-hand side the site manager. So in here, you will have to go into the different files. So again, it looks a lot more complex than the traditional way. So you have the assets, CSS, the data, and I'm doing the index HTML file. Then next you have the Git manager. So you have Git repository if you want to integrate with GitHub and such. Then next you have the workflow. So here you create more the server-side models, the app flows and server actions that you want to create. And then next you have the database. So if you want, you can connect to any database that you want. So whether it's a MongoDB, it's a Firebase database, pretty much any database is completely up to you. Then routing is more for you to put what are the URLs for each of your pages that you want. You have the theme manager if you want to go with a certain design on a global level. And then lastly, you have the search if you want to do certain searches within. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details here because firstly, I'm not an expert at Wappler at all. There are many tutorials out there and they have quite a good, strong community. I'm actually very impressed. So even for beginners, there is a lot of support on the community to help beginners to get started. And I think that's really, really great about Wappler as well. And traditionally, as seen also on the right-hand side, you then have all the specific details like we see in most no codes, where you have the hierarchy of what goes where. Now, if you want to see the different components that you can have, if you click on this button right here, you have plenty of components that you can then use that have the content, the forms, the list. There's pretty much probably everything that you need to most extent. You have the workflows that you want to create, components. Again, it is not a simple one-day learning curve for Wappler. From what I understand, it could take weeks to months to really learn Wappler and how to use it. But once you understand how to use Wappler, again, you really have the power of a visual builder to pretty much do anything that you like, while also having the control over all your files and the assets. So I hope that gave you some idea regarding the different type of no-code builders and the exporting that they offer. Now, Webflow, I really like Webflow for the Bildr. It's really, really awesome. Now, the issue with Webflow, of course, is it's not really a web application builder, right? It's targeting websites, which is fine, but for me, I usually work with web applications. Then you have Bildr and Drapcode, which do provide the web application part. And I think it's pretty cool what they offer, especially Drapcode can give you the ability to export everything, of course, for a certain price, as already mentioned. Now, if you don't care so much about the exporting ability, I probably wouldn't start with these tools, but I would rather look at Bobble, AppJava, Dalo, which have stronger communities that have been around for a little bit longer, and they're probably easier for beginners. But if you do care about having that, let's say, code export a little bit, or if you can at least export your screen to some extent, then Drapcode and Bildr are two good options. Then lastly, we discussed Wappler. Now, Wappler is probably more low-code than a no-code solution, and it really gives you that additional boost of flexibility and control that probably nobody else in the market can offer you. Now, the downside of Wappler is, of course, that there is a learning curve to it, and if you're just trying to validate your idea, I probably wouldn't try to learn Wappler. Instead, I would use one of the other tools. But having said that, if you do have the time, try out Wappler. If you have the ability to actually learn Wappler, it's probably a great way to validate your idea and even scale with it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and let me know below in the comment section, do you have questions? Have you used these tools before? Or do you have some other tools that you would recommend? Thanks a lot for watching.